Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast track personal growth, improve lives, and empower parents, and also save relationships, families, and marriages. So, on the Nurturing Astrology podcast, I will offer practical guidance for applying astrology to all of these important areas of life. I'll offer insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to get started. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your host and astrologer. And today I'm super excited to have Alex Trenoweth with me. And we're going to dive into astrology and child development with Jupiter and Saturn. And some practical, guidance for how to work with these planets and placements for you as parents, astrologers, and educators. So let me first introduce a little bit about Alex, and then we'll dive in. So Alex is an author, teacher, and an award-winning astrologer. Her book, Growing Pains, was actually written for adolescents, their parents, and teachers. It wasn't originally based for astrologers, which I just found out and I think is fascinating. She has been featured in Dell Horoscope, Kindred Spirit, The Career Astrologer, and many publications. Welcome, Alex. I'm super thrilled to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
I've been reading on your site last night about all of your extensive teaching and travels and experiences from, worldwide. The work that you've been doing in education and in the astrological community is like so impressive. You've been super busy.
Thank you. Yes, I have.
And it's crazy how we were just saying, we wrote Growing Pains some years back. When Mercury was retrograde, you released it. And now we're seeing it now, this Mercury retrograde, it's just been popping. Would you say that is partly because of the pandemic and the disruption of education and parents really seeking?
I've never been busier. I mean, it is crazy. But a lot of my work over the pandemic was helping parents understand how to teach, because suddenly they were thrust in this role and they didn't know how to teach. And I remembered back when I was learning how to teach that I didn't know how to do it either. There was but we've have this thread of being taught in a certain way all the way from our great grandparents. Yeah. And so there's a pattern that has to be done. So parents were thinking, I believe, that the way to teach a child is to talk at them for an hour. And that is not how we teach. We give them a task, tell them what we want them to do, let it percolate, let them get on with it, come back, evaluate it, talk to them about it, talk it through. Also in a classroom, we have group work. Yeah. And that's impossible to do. And also we're all teaching the same year group. Well, if you are one-to-one with mom and dad and you got, or with the siblings as well, the parents had to teach different levels. So They could be teaching grade 3, but they have a grade 6 as well. So you can't teach them the same thing or expect the same outcomes. They have to understand how they're going to deliver this A lesson to 2 different year groups. It's very revealing to look at children and how they're developing now that the pandemic is over. Well, we think it's over with. Right. We can tell instantly who's done their homework and who hasn't. It's so apparent. It's scary, actually. And which year group has had the most? When we were locked down, there are certain year groups we target. And when we see how that year group has not progressed, they have lost huge chunks of basic skills like independent learning, for example, for our current year 5s who are 10-year-olds, we can tell that they didn't get what they should have gotten back when they were 7 and 8-year-olds. So it's how are we going to recover from this? And I think astrology has the answer.
I do too. I really do. And that's one of the things that's so, I keep trying to find some lights at the end of this crazy tunnel. And I do think that is one of them, that education systems are having to be reevaluated and relooked at and changed. And that there is maybe an inroad for astrology, you know. Have you had any inroads in education with astrology since then, or is it just has your work been basically directly with the parents?
Um, Both.
Yeah.
I think that astrology, of course, is a bit of a short code in
Yes.
that it gets through the nitty gritty of what you need to do. And I'm not proposing at all that we treat all students the same way. I'm just saying that, for teachers, we need to get in to a child's learning style quickly.
Yes.
And we need to be able to understand. And a lot of that comes from the teacher being confident about what they are teaching. And astrology can be a huge help in helping that teacher just understanding themselves and then presenting themselves as somebody who's informed, confident, and sure of themselves, as opposed to feeling vulnerable and weak in front of the kids. So that's where I think astrology can help. And the same thing goes for parents too.
Mhm.
Um, it can help a parent understand their shortcomings, build on those shortcomings, and when they're ready to have a child, there we go. They're already a step ahead of the game.
Oh, I totally agree. And I know that from your other talks, you talk about the difference between Mercury and Jupiter, and Mercury being that early learning of rote learning and development, and then that putting those pieces together and expanding through the Jupiter. And that was when we talked earlier, Alex had shared on the Pam Gregory talk about how she was kind of stifled with her research project and stuff by the school. And when I was trying to do an early research project through my son's school, it was with learning styles and Mercury. And I actually ended up doing a little bit of a small research project with Cornelia Henson, who is my mentor and teacher, who wrote Kid Wheels. And we tried to use all of the planets in terms of what senses they actually ruled and body parts, because the kids learn with their senses, and especially when they're young, right? The sensory motor system, and that's part of Piaget, right? So did you share with parents to how to actually, let these younger ones draw a picture, or these older ones write a story, right? Do you bring in those senses? And do you see Mercury as part of the development of learning styles when they're younger? Because I know when they're older, you're like, it's Jupiter, not Mercury. But do you still see that the entire chart plays a role in understanding learning styles?
I have to say that no, I don't see it that
Okay.
way. Okay, so let me explain a little bit.
Yes.
So the only business I have in a child's chart is their Jupiter and how they learn.
Yep.
And I can't look at Mercury because Mercury's rote learning. That is not my concern, and it's too much data for
Yes,
me
I
to
noticed that.
manage in a classroom.
That's what
So
we
I need to keep
discovered too.
everything streamlined. And I believe the sun is very important, and because Mercury stays close to the sun as well. I'm not dismissing it, but I'm just
Right.
saying in the classroom, my business is a child's learning.
Yes.
And my business is also, disciplining them and keeping them, in a certain sort of formation.
Yes.
And for me, it's making things simple, because with Saturn and Pisces, I can make things very, very complicated and very,
Yeah.
very chaotic. And I have got to
Yeah.
streamline it.
So how does that work
So
differently for the primary versus secondary school? Are you still dealing with Jupiter when you're teaching primary school?
okay, so Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the
Right.
zodiac.
Mhm.
So every 3 years, it hits a critical point.
Excellent.
So here in England, 3 years old, they come into reception. We call it
Got it.
reception. You call it nursery, maybe, I don't know. And
Yes.
then at 6 years is the time when they're starting to learn how to read and write and
Right.
things like that. 9 years old is really important too, because some of them are starting to hit puberty. They're starting to get that brain development. And the Jupiter return at 12 years old, I say, is the most important year of a child's life.
Yep.
If you're going to go traveling, do it then. Drag the whole family, make them all benefit, but get that child learning a different language, get them experiencing a different culture, teach them about different religions.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, they will have started a new school, so they will get some of these naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, during the pandemic, for God's sake, those children didn't get that opportunity. It was just like, and Jupiter was in its weakest point, in the weakest signs. It was going through, Jupiter was in Capricorn and Aquarius, where our Saturn ruled signs. So, it was not a great experience. And now we're picking the pieces, we can see where things went awry.
Yes. I
With
love
that.
that. I love that the difference in Mercury and Jupiter, and that you can actually be looking at Jupiter the entire time.
Yeah.
That's great. That's fascinating. It makes total sense too. I think that, young astrologers and, that community, a lot of them are drilled into their head that Mercury rules communication. That's like baseline, right? How we communicate, how we think. But it's actually, and even what I've learned from Cornelius, like just how the brain, the synapses is, bringing information and like building memory, actually understanding how the brain remembers things and how you build memory is really, really key. And so that's the thing that I find fascinating about taking the research of, say, Piaget's cognitive development or Erickson's stages of development, and you can see those in the cycles of the planets. And that should bring so much validity to astrology, but yet it doesn't. But that, all this great research that you have, and it doesn't seem to be more widely accepted, which baffles me, but those things are so important. What's that?
Not the data. That's because there's not the data to back it up. And I think, I have the data to back it up. And, I was in a position with permission from my school to use this data however I needed to. And actually, I was banned from using astrology in my early teaching career. But by the end of my time with this one particular school where I got all the data from, I was actually delivering lectures based on this data, taking the astrology language out of it, but showing, hey, listen, you guys, it is the Jupiter return that is the most important year. And look at where the brain development is happening. Look at what our data is telling us about behavior. Children that are 12 years old are in trouble for disruption. At 13, they're in trouble for defiance. At 14 and 15, the Saturn opposition, they're in trouble for not doing enough work. And look where we're messing up. We are missing out on all this brain development. And I passionately believe a bored child is a naughty child. They're going to get in trouble because the younger adolescents, the ones that are in trouble for disruption, are being ignored. They're coming from a warm, cozy primary school environment. They're coming into this big school where they're going to be ignored because everyone knows it's all about exam results. And we're messing it up. And, so, there was that experience too of okay. Oh, she might be weird, but she has a point here. So
good point.
Hopefully, that kind of makes, teachers think. If we can take the astrological language out of it, they can't take it. We put something else in.
Exactly. And that's a gift I think astrologers have to learn too, is to really take that language out and be able to translate this really valuable information. And I try to tell, my parents, like, every year your teacher will give you a form at the beginning that says, is there anything I need to know about your child? And that's where, when you understand their astrology or how they, they might need to sit a little closer, they, they need to be like away from disturbances and they're a little bit distractible or that kind of thing, that you can write those things in there without the astrology, but that could be how you were informed. They don't need to know that, right? You're still giving them that great information. Right.
There was a very funny joke when the pandemic first started. And please, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just saying that, when a child's in trouble at school, the first thing a parent will say, oh, but they're not like this at home. So when the parents are struggling, the teachers are like, oh, but they're not like this at school. So there was this misunderstanding. Like, teachers see a child conscious more than a parent does. We see them, socializing, interacting, learning, and it's far more time than a parent gets because they only see them maybe in the early mornings, maybe in the evenings and the weekends, and altogether it's less than what a teacher sees. And the whole entire chemical thing going on within the classroom affects a child's behavior.
Absolutely. That's so true. And I know I've heard stories where, you'll hear stories that the child is really great in school and you're like, well, he's not that way at home, right? And I always think, well, there's obviously some things happening in the house, right? But they have to be more aware and more conscious, with authority and, things in school. And I always think, well, at least they're good when they're out in the world, right? But that's,
okay, let's think about a child who has natally Sun conjunct Pluto.
Okay.
So in a classroom, everyone else is going to have their Pluto on that child's sun, right? Does that make sense? So that child is going to be like triggered in a classroom because they're all the same age, and they all are playing off in this child's sun. You go
Mm.
home, and the sibling won't have that, might not have that configuration. It'd be completely different sort of um,
Energy,
configuration.
dynamic. Yeah, a
Yeah,
different dynamic.
dynamic is a better word. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's very fascinating. So true. Wow. Okay, so let's shift gears. I know that Saturn is, Jupiter is that planet of expansion, and it's a really big time of really like giving that child some freedom to grow and evolve, right? With certain parameters, structure, right? You have like, you need structure, and showing them how to be responsible. And we always say, responsibility equals freedom. Like you can't really have or teach freedom without showing them how to be responsible. I know parents like, oh, if you're responsible, you get this as a reward, this freedom. Do you see that do you see Saturn and Saturn and Jupiter in that relationship too? Is like being responsible and then having those freedoms?
Yeah. I think, in when you got this child who, like one of the things I talk about a lot is the idea that because of all that brain development and the sleep disruption, that a teenager should be able to start school later
I love that.
than they did in primary school.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, okay, you guys, we'll let you start school at 11 o'clock. But here's the deal. You come to school on time in your uniform, because we wear uniforms over here.
Yeah.
You have your packed lunch sorted out. These are the things that you're going to do. Because if you can't do this, we're going to go right back to starting at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you present it that way, you say, if you do this, this is what we're going to do for you. And they will work towards preserving that freedom.
Yes, exactly. I love that concept. I totally believe in it. And my first thought goes to, well, how in the world are we going to get school systems to allow us to do that? Like, here's this great information, right? That we know can make a difference. And how do we penetrate the system to allow that to happen?
I don't understand what the problem is.
I don't either.
Because they're older children. It's not like they're like 6 years old. And they're 6 years old, of course, you got to get them up, give them the cornflakes or whatever. But when they're 11, 12, 13, they are old enough to get themselves, set their alarms, get themselves up, feed themselves breakfast. They can do that.
Yes.
And, why we're continuing to treat them like prisoners, as we do, is a mystery to me.
Yeah.
They don't need, okay, even if a parent goes to work, the child can still do things that are independent and, helps them create their own independent lives, as opposed to imposing these rules that aren't really working for them and actually work against them.
So can we go through, I think we were saying that maybe the modes would be the easiest way to do it. Could we go through the modes of Saturn, the cardinal, fixed, immutable, and give parents some insight into their potential challenges that they could look at for themselves, or even the fears that their child might be dealing with that they could then maybe help support as they're maturing and dealing with their own personal growth journey?
Sure. So let's go back to why the modalities are important.
Yes.
My argument is that we have important stages of development with Saturn every 7 years, and that is the transiting square to the natal position.
Right.
Astrologers say to me, why don't you use the soft aspects? And my argument is the hard aspects force us to do something.
Right.
So if you have, we're starting the cardinal signs, if you have Saturn in a cardinal sign, what you're probably going to be doing is pushing too fast, too quickly, and you're going to have to redo things all the time. So your trick is, okay, nice deep breath. Let's look at where you want to go and how fast or how much time you have to do what you want to do, and pacing yourself. Okay, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And helping that so that Saturn in Aries, Saturn in Cancer, Saturn in Libra, Saturn in Capricorn.
Yeah.
So it's helping that child to understand, okay, so you got 7 years to set your goal, and that all that time to get to it, there's no need to rush through. Help them take a nice deep breath.
I love that.
So for Saturn in Aries, don't be so hard on yourself. Saturn in Cancer, understand those emotions behind it. Saturn in Libra, Who are the people who are going to help you? And Saturn in Capricorn is looking at your future. How can you actually get the people around you who are going to help you with your reputation, and thinking it through, choosing wisely.
And so for parents, you're seeing that for kids, but that's also for parents, right? Slow down, like having expectations and pushing too hard or expecting too much. Or so would you say that similarly take that for the parents' role? Because you say that we should, as parents, understand our Saturn first.
Absolutely. And even, for you guys, for the authority figure, going back through your life, what happened at 7?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are common themes that we have, at 7. We
Mm-hmm.
lose our baby teeth, for example. Some structures in our life are gonna fall apart. We had to put them back together again. But look back at the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you understand the pattern, you can help your child understand theirs. So it's all about you first.
Yes.
And that's going to be hard for Saturn and Aries, because they're all about, being hard on themselves and stuff like that. But for Saturn and Aries, it's really understanding, okay, you don't really have to go through it all by yourself.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay, let's
For
move
Saturn
on.
and Cancer. Oh, sorry.
No, keep going. Share.
Saturn and Cancer, it's not about ignoring your emotions or being afraid to cry.
Mhm.
For Saturn and Libra, it's not about, feeling you have to go through destroyed relationships. And for Saturn in Capricorn, it's not about wrecking your reputation or whatever because you've been careless. It's all about the pace, I think.
Oh, pace. That's really important. I love that. Pace. I have Saturn in Taurus. So let's move to the fixed signs.
Okay. Okay. So the fixed signs are about, okay, I'm here. I'm not going to move anywhere. So it's about inertia. Newton's first law. Okay, so objects in rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motions tend to be motion. So it's about trying to understand, okay, you need to do something to get from point A to point B. So there needs to be something there to help you push along. And knowing what motivates you is going to be something that's going to be extremely important for you. For Saturn and Taurus, what are your values? What do you really appreciate? Saturn and Leo, okay, I'm comfortable on the stage sometimes, and sometimes I don't want to be. I'll give you a great example. Elton John has Saturn and Leo.
Oh,
and he
interesting.
said in Rocket Man, you have to kill the person you are to become the person you want to be. So he had to create this fake persona with all the flamboyance and stuff like that in order to ignore the fact that he's just a fat boy from Pinner. Those are his words, not mine.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Saturn in Scorpio. Saturn in Scorpio has to dice with death. They have to play with danger in order to see God. Okay. And that's also similar for Saturn in Jupiter in Scorpio. It's about, this idea of, playing with fire.
Yeah.
And
Risking.
Saturn Aquarius, I always call that the Frankenstein.
Okay.
Because it's creating little monsters. And instead, like Frankenstein, like ran away from his monster, it's taking responsibilities for those little monsters, looking after them, nurturing them, keeping them contained, as opposed to running away.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's really good. Okay. And for the mutable moms and children.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of similar to what I said about the Frankensteins. They need to like sit still for a minute. Okay. So the cardinal signs run ahead. The fixed signs don't want to move, but the mutable signs tend to want to just run away and not do what they should do. So it's really about sitting with what they need to be responsible for, and actually being like a part of what they've created, and just saying, okay, I've done this. I'm going to do something with it. So it's not about having lots of different interests. It's about choosing one interest and staying with it and nurturing it, looking after it, protecting it, and then moving on. So also similar to the cardinal signs, pacing. Slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, because you can have that mutability, you end up being scattered and you're trying to be organized and focused, kind of like Pisces, right? And you can't be. You end up being the mom who's like, all over the place and you can't seem to like organize anything. And then your child is also can be that way. Then you've got chaos.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And the fixed parents, if they're fixed, they need to learn how to move and just keep going and pace and push through. And if their child is also fixed, then you're going to be butting heads sometimes, and you've got to like work together to keep
Yep.
it going, or you need to work to keep up if your kid's going, and you're slower to move. So again, recognizing where you're challenged or your struggle might be, and then how to support them, right?
Yep, absolutely right.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Do you want to go through the mutables real quick with those one scenarios you were doing? I don't want to leave those people out. You said so Gemini,
Oh, okay.
Virgo.
So Saturn and Gemini, um, they have this idea that God is going to ask them to write the big book review someday. And they're not going to, because they've read everything. They fear that God is going to say to them, hey, what about, what about Kant? What about this one? What about that one? And they're gonna be like, so
Fear of
in a
not ever
classroom,
knowing enough, right?
yes, exactly. Perfect. Yes. Saturn and Virgo. I have not gone through every detail as well as I should. I missed something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Here's a pro tip though. They're really good for helping you in the classroom.
I bet.
Give them a green pen and get them marking. 'Cause, um, and the Saturn in,
Sagittarius.
have I missed one?
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius, excuse me, Sagittarius. Okay, so Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Saturn is not very strong in Sagittarius. But they get into this thing too that they don't know enough. So here we get with the mutable signs, we have the double-bodied signs, where the class can quite easily polarized into those who think they know everything and those who think that they don't know anything. And so you have to work with those polarities and try to get them to meet in the middle. And as I described with Saturn and Pisces, it's about keeping on top of the chaos and choosing your moments, choosing the right time to do something, and choosing what to focus on,
Yeah.
one thing at a time. But get trying to get organized is hard for Saturn and Pisces.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's so good. So good. I love that those tips for like dispelling the fears and realizing that our challenges, and they don't have to be, making friends with Saturn is about recognizing that it's also part of the growth process, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the learning process. You can't learn without making mistakes.
You
You know,
can't
and
learn without making mistakes. Yep.
and I think so many people. I mean, I don't know what all this is about fearing Saturn, but I think Saturn wants to be worked. It wants to be practiced. And if you think, oh my God, I'm so scared to make a mistake, you're working against your Saturn.
Yes.
So you have to embrace that sort of fear. Okay, well, the example I often use is my handwriting. When I was 7 years old, I had the worst handwriting in the class. And my teacher, Mrs. Montross, I remember her name, she used to make me stay after school and practice my handwriting. And my handwriting was terrible, and it's still terrible. But she said, okay, you are going to sit with me every lunchtime, and we're going to do these letters until I can read it. And I remember crying over my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches until one day she said to me, you are no longer the worst handwriter in the class. And I got this lovely little certificate that said most improved handwriting that I still have to this day.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Oh my gosh, that's a great story. That's a great story. So, how about you had mentioned to me as well, two things. The first one is, do you look at any hard aspects? You said you look at like the harder aspects, the squares and the oppositions. Do you look to then also, like, say you have Saturn in Aries, do you then look to where Mars is and play into, go further with that? Is that too much, or only when you're doing readings? And also, do you look at in a child's chart, like if they have, challenges to their Jupiter or Saturn?
Okay, so I have what I call the triage system. The first step is I know everybody's Jupiter and Saturn. I can't help it. A dentist is going to look at a children's teeth, right?
Right.
So I know everybody's Jupiter and Saturn. Second step is, say I got a child who's playing me up and they're giving me a lot of difficulties. I am going to look at where the Jupiter and Saturn is compared to mine. And with permission,
Right.
If I have to get that far, my third step is talking to the parent and saying, look, this is my problem. I'd like to do this. I'm an astrologer. Will you let me do this?
Mm-hmm.
And every time I've asked that question, the parents have been always very generous and have
Oh,
allowed me to do that. I look at their charts. I talk to the parents about it because, I have, if I'm a professional astrologer and a professional teacher, I have these skills, right? I've been practicing for a long time. I have them both, and I could talk to a parent about what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I work.
That's
And the
smart.
second question was about looking at the,
Well, just
you asked me.
that was pretty much that question about the aspects, and the other one was about oh yes, when you were saying that there's always a connection between Saturn and the parents and the child's chart.
Yeah, and also the nodes as well. There'll always be a connection between them. So there will always be a connection that will give you advice and ideas about how that you can work with the child. And when I work with a child's chart, when I get to the stage where I ask a parent, can I look at your child's chart? I'm looking at theirs too. They
Yes.
don't get out of anything.
Nope.
I'm going to be saying, let me look at yours. Let me give you some advice. Looking at the siblings, looking at the whole family. There's
Mhm.
something that's amiss, and I think astrology can help pinpoint it, as
Mhm.
opposed to the guesswork that we use in the education system. Schools will try anything.
Yep.
Myers-Briggs, you name it, they'll try it, but they won't try astrology,
I know, it's so crazy.
which is ridiculous. Yeah.
It,
Well, I
it
guess
really
I
is.
guess we have a lot of practitioners who don't do things the right way, I guess. And I suppose that we, as a society, have gone down a bad route
Yeah.
of.
And that's another great thing. So for parents, we know, look, if you're I always say, if you're triggered, then maybe you need to seek out some real help that'll help you, right? So this is where the astrologer can come in. So maybe that's where we also need to help teach astrologers how to approach family charts and dynamics between children and parents. And so what is your best advice, or a few like really great tips for astrologers who are doing charts for parents who are concerned about their child or looking at child charts? Do you have sort of a system for looking at them that you would impart that wisdom on other astrologers if they're going to go this route and try and help parents and families?
My first thing is, my big rule is never ever have an unsupervised child in your consultancy. Never ever. That's something
Yep.
that I wouldn't do. And I have police protection. I have loads of child protection training, and I would never have an unsupervised child. So always have a parent there,
Yes.
because when you have a parent with you in a consultancy, anything that a child discloses is a parent's responsibility. It's not yours. As soon as a child discloses to you, you have to do something about it, and you have to know who to talk to, what to do,
Mhm.
and it's a big thing. This thing
Yeah,
about child protection.
for sure.
So that's my first rule.
And so what is the approach? Like, do you have, I know that I've been taught from Cornelia that temperament is a really like great way in without labeling and boxing, but you can understand because we're born with temperament. What is your feeling about that? And do you have any other tips for astrologers in terms of like, if you're going to sit down and look at parenting, start with this, or look at this first, or, any that kind of advice?
I'm not completely certain what is meant by temperament. I mean by sun, or do you mean by astrological?
No, there's in Cornelia's book, Kid Will, she created an entire system where she looks elements, modes, aspects. She actually has I think it's like 6 or 7. There's a whole system that basically helps determine if they're like an easy child, slow to warm up, more challenging, and then she has a breakdown. So you can actually take and find tips, like if your child has high persistence or high activity, that can be seen through the evaluation, or if they're distractible, then you can have, there's tips in child development that you can offer parents, and they learn in class in terms of how to support a distractible child, like helping them learn how to make lists and not to forget things, and giving them lots of breaks and things like this. So it's a way of merging the child development process with seeing that in this formula she created, in temperament, in determining temperament through the modes and the elements mostly.
Is she a teacher?
Yeah, she was a teacher for years.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
I'm not familiar with her system, but I'm going to stick my neck out a little bit and just sort of say that, you know, in the school system, you know, everyone's kind of in the same
Yes.
realm.
Right.
And
Exactly. It's hard. You can't follow individual temperament or support them individually. That's where I think the parents' role comes in.
yeah, and parents, you know, just they need to be more involved, I think, in the children's education. They can't just send a kid off to school and let the teachers deal with it and then come back when they're 18 and
Right.
pick up the exam results. It has to be a process where they're involved. So, like, for example, I tell parents, 12 years old, that's a Jupiter return. You need to get in there because the teachers are not in a position where they can
Right.
do it all then. Because, as I explained, that those years are when they are not in anybody's focus. And
Yes.
so parents need to pick up that slack a little bit. I know, you know, they want to think that teachers do everything, but it's not the
No.
way it works. That's why
Yeah.
I'm trying to be really transparent about what really
Absolutely.
happens in the educational
Exactly.
system.
So I
So
think what you're
it's
saying
not,
then is it's good for astrologers to look how old is your child and recognizing maybe what Jupiter transit they might be in or Saturn transit they might be in and start sort of addressing that as from the developmental standpoint as well as maybe the
yeah,
sign and how they can look at their own challenges and weaknesses and where they can support their child. Would that make sense?
yes. Yes,
Okay.
developmental mental stages are very important. So, for example, if you have a Jupiter return child, I'm going to say, and you got other children there, I'm going to say the Jupiter return child is your priority. And I'm not saying ignore the other children. I'm just saying that Jupiter return child's when the brain development's going on. Um, so the main ages are 3,
Yeah.
7, 9, 12, 15, and 18.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm not saying ignore the other ages. I'm just saying that's where you should be focusing.
Got it. Oh, that's so good. So, do you have any fun? I think we've covered a lot, don't you? I mean, is there anything I
Yeah.
was going to ask? See if there's any questions that I had left out. I know that I was going to ask about um, retrograde planets, but you were saying that when it's retrograde, like a Jupiter or Saturn retrograde, how do you look at that, like in a natal chart?
So I don't look at it as having a meaning per se.
It's a timing, you were saying, right?
It's the timing because, you know, a retrograde Jupiter at birth, um, is that retrograde motion, has a retrograde motion happen before birth? Are you going to expect one after your birth? And that'll have a knock-on effect on when the Jupiter return actually happens. Is it an
Right.
early Jupiter return? Is it a later Jupiter return? And that's what I'm looking at when I look at
Right. So if
the
they're born
retrograde.
with, say, Saturn retrograde, then that Saturn first square or even opposition might be at a different timing
Yes. Yes,
based on the
exactly.
traditional framework because it was retrograde when they were born.
Yes.
Gotcha. So the meanings are the same. It's just the timing that you're looking at in terms of the aspects. That makes total sense. And got it.
Well, how will you tell someone, okay, I got Jupiter retrograde? Does that mean I'm stupid?
No.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
Absolutely.
traditionally in retrograde energies, you learn in astrology that the energy is sort of more internalized or not as openly expressed, right? Or like, with Mercury retrograde, obviously you're used to like repeating things, redoing things, or that all those things, right? So that's the way I've always learned.
Just let me roll my eyes.
Yeah.
Hold on. Okay, I have Mercury retrograde.
And I love
Janis
retrogrades.
Joplin, Hillary Clinton,
Yep.
Michael Jackson. We all have Mercury retrograde, and there's nothing wrong with us.
Nothing.
Do we redo things?
That's actually one of the talks that we just did that I'm going to be sharing is about reframing retrogrades and tough transits and aspects, because those are the things that like make stuff happen, so I really want to, that's one of the things too here, like reframe these things and give a new lease on life to retrograde. I love Mercury retrograde, and it's I feel like it gets a bad rap too, poor thing.
I was watching. I've been binge watching House. Do you know House? The series House.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's got Hugh Laurie in it, British actor, and he's working in an American hospital. And one line he says, he's got a very bad limp and very bad leg, and he's all the lifts, all the elevators are shut down. And he says, "What is Mercury retrograde or something?"
I know, and they do commercial. I mean, not commercial. I see commercials with more astrology in it than ever before now. And there's even like some cartoons. There was an entire episode of my son's one of his cartoons he watches about following your horrible scope, and if you didn't, bad things would happen, and like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like on the one hand you're like, oh, that's kind of cute, and on the other hand, like, you're not doing us any favors over here with the astrologers in terms of, you know, helping us validate this really powerful, you know, language, if you want to call it that. But it's a bummer. But you know, you're like, okay, we'll take the good with the bad. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, right? Because we feel passionate about it and we know it can make a difference. And hopefully one day down the line, our work will pay off, right? That's
and I said to astrologers too, just whatever you say, put some data behind it.
Yes, that's another great one. That's again why I like the child development, because you have, you know, here, this is where your child's at, and it's in her development or his development. And astrology, it can be seen like this. And it just, I think that's so important. So really, like, do take other classes. Don't just, you know, take astrology classes, take child development classes, take, you know, brain development, brain stage classes, you know, learning the whole system, get some data behind that is really going to make you feel confident and more, you know, empowered about what you're sharing with your parents or your, you know, educators and stuff. So this has been awesome. Do you have any like final closing words of wisdom for us, mothers, astrologers, educators?
Okay, I would just say the most important thing is to know your Saturn. Know it by sign, house, aspect, know it by transit. Find, if you're obviously of a certain age, you're going to have to go back and look at the major transits by square and try to find that rhythm. And once you understand yourself, you can look at your child's chart, because you're coming from less ego and more to do with accomplishment and confidence, as opposed to, you know, if you're not feeling good about something, you're going to resort back to the ego thing, you know, against the sun. So you need to sort that out and take some time to understand those cycles through a professional astrologer. Ask a professional astrologer, you know, look at my Saturn and help understand it. Because I think a lot of astrologers don't really understand Jupiter and Saturn either.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot more about it through listening to you and reading your stuff and taking your class through OPA, which you just did. Like I knew a lot, but I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. And so even like in terms of learning the learning styles and really bringing that in, and I think helping parents really understand, you know, where they can make a difference. And I'm one of those parents who's always been involved in the classroom. I volunteered ever since my child was young, and finally I'm like, okay, if there's a year when you don't want me in the class, like, I get it, just let me know. But I was one of those parents who wanted to be involved. And I think it's important for parents to realize that it starts with them, and the teachers have so much on their plate already. So the more, you know, I can empower parents, I feel like I also am inadvertently helping the teachers. Even if I can't get anything into the education system, I'm empowering them, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, in secondary school, in middle school, a little bit of private tuition, investing in a child's education a little bit more. It's only $30 extra a week to hire a private tutor who will work with the classroom teacher. You know, you don't have to do more than that. Don't do more than that. They can help that child really understand whatever topic it is. And I think that's a good thing to do too.
Awesome. Well, I highly recommend to grab your book, Growing Pains, Astrology for Adolescence. And also you do mention that you do reports on your website, that you created reports for parents.
Yes, they're automatic reports.
And what do they provide?
They provide a general overview of a child's birth chart, but what's special about mine is I also have the Saturn and Jupiter there too.
So you'll put in your child's birth information and you'll get the report for your child. And do you do one for the parent as well?
They can get one too.
Yeah.
They either get that report. There's different things you can get from the report generator. So
okay, that's great. Did you have that established, that created for you?
No, I wrote every single word.
Oh my Lord.
Every
God
sign,
bless your
every
soul.
house, every aspect. Yes, it took me, it's more work than an astrology book would have been.
Wow. Well, thank you for
Eh,
that. Because I think, that would be a great way for parents to like really get their specific insight. I mean, the book I'm sure has
absolutely.
broad information, and I think it should be on every astrologer's, shelf. And then if you're trying to or wanting to do family charts or, parenting, as a focus, the way I'm been moving towards for years now, I think it's really important. It's a great resource to have. But if you want, hey, let me go get that information and I can't really get a reading right now, the report is like a great launch pad, right?
Yes, and it's a lot cheaper too.
That's what I
And
was saying.
you can read it whenever you want to. You don't have to, book an appointment with me, which can be quite tedious these days.
Right. You're a busy woman. Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. Even the littlest, investment you're saying, hey, an investment in a quick report to understand that energy for you or for your child can be, priceless. There's just such great nuggets you can get that can ultimately make all the difference.
Yes.
And I was thrilled that you agreed to come and chat with me, and thank you so
Pleasure.
much. And I want everyone to listen and definitely like maybe submit some questions if you're interested in having Alex back on and learning some more from her, because I know I would. But this has been awesome, and I so appreciate your time. I know you're so busy.
No worries. Thank you.
You're doing amazing work, and I so appreciate it.
You.
And keep it up. I know you're busy, but keep it up.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye.